All right, so let's turn to Excel for a moment. I want to show you a couple of things. I want to show you how I've put all of this together in Excel, which I've actually just walked through all of it, but I want to give it to you again. And I want to show you how we came up with the WACC equation and such. So let's start up here for the market value of the bonds, and this is a different set of numbers, okay? Notice here that I'm using an Excel function that is the equal PV or present value or net present value function. I did this here rather than do the math here. You could just as easily do the math using the equation, but, well, actually it's easier to use the function. So let me go ahead and replicate the function in another cell, and it'll come up with the same value we got here. Notice here I've got a 5% coupon rate, so that's the original rate at which it was issued. So that coupon rate times the face value of 1,000 divided by 2 periods per year results in a coupon payment of 25. So 5% times 1,000 is 50 divided by 2 periods per year is 25. So that's C. YTM, or the current yield on an annualized basis, is 4.75% in this case. So we're saying that bonds were issued at 5%, but interest rates have gone down a little bit in the interim, okay? But there's 2 periods per year. There's 15 years left to maturity, $1,000 face value. And when I put together the function, I use each one of those inputs. Let me build it from scratch for you. So I'm going to say equals PV and then parentheses. So I've opened up the present value function in Excel. And when I do it, you might be able to see, and it's awfully small here, I apologize, that Excel brings up that it wants to see the rate, the number of periods, the payments, and the future value. That's what that small type is, and I don't think I can make that large. Let me see if I can. I don't think I can. Equals PV.
I thought there was a way you could have a dialog box that you just that popped up the entered all that stuff in.
Yeah, there might be, and I don't know what it is, Matt. I'm terribly sorry. If one of you knows, I'm happy.
If I figure it out,
Yeah, you teach me, okay?
I feel like somebody taught that in another class. I'll see if I can find out.
Maybe so. Okay, so I'm going to find the rate. Well, what's the rate? It's the periodic rate. So we have to do all of this in period consistent items. So the number of periods has to be periodic, so 2 per year. The payment is periodic, so it's a semi-annual payment. And the rate is periodic. So to enter the rate value, I'm going to take this rate right here. I'm going to divide it by the periods per year. So I've given a semi-annual rate. I now want the number of periods. Well, I've got 15 years times the periods per year. And now it wants to know the payment. Well, I can do one of two things. I'll just pick up the payment because I've already calculated it, just like I'd already calculated the period, the end number of periods. I've already calculated it here, so I'm just going to pick that up. And now it wants to know the future value, and I also have already given that. So I've got it before this first comma, I've got the periodic yield to maturity or current yield. I've got the periodic number of periods. I've got the periodic payment, and I now have the future value. And I've closed my parenthesis, and it gives me 1,026.6, which is almost the same as what I have here, except one's in red and the other's isn't. Why is that? Any idea?
Red is usually negative.
Yeah, my present value equation that I have here, Diana, I have a little negative right before the PV. The reason is because Excel, just like your calculator, uses an input-output function. I have to pay $1,026.60 in order to get this $25 per period cash flow and this $1,000 back at the end. So a negative has got to be balanced by a positive. And when you look at the the time value of money videos I have online for you, the ones I showed you, and I'll show you again before we're done here, you'll see a little bit more succinctly the utility of that negative. And you'll also see me running through the math to do this. I've used here and here, I've simply used the function. I haven't used the algebra. The algebra is a little bit more complicated, but if you look on my website, in fact, we'll go there very quickly together. If you look at my website, richardhaskell.net, and go to the Excel templates, you'll find a bond value calculator template. You bring that up, and lo and behold, it gives you, in a very simple templated form, everything we just walked through. But it shows you not just the function, but it shows you the mathematical notation if you wanted to go through and do all the algebra. This mathematical notation you see here is that algebraic equation for the bonds, but with all the proper order of operation parenthetic statements. Okay?
Hey, Rick.
Please.
I figured out how to have it pull up the dialog box for that function. So you'll go over to formulas.
In fact, let me go back to that spreadsheet.
Okay.
This one. Okay.
Yeah, so you'll go over to formulas up top there, and then click the drop down under financial. And you'll have to search through this kind of list that's alphabetized to find that PV function that you were using.
Okay.
And then once you click on it through this way, it should pull up a dialog box. Yeah.
Ah. Can I make this dialog box larger though, Michael? This type is just as small as the other.
That I don't know, but at least when we're doing it at home, it might make it a little bit easier. That's the way that I prefer to do formulas.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So you can get at it through the formulas and functions. We could have also used the insert function structure to get there. And I'll apologize. I never use any of these. I learn the function. I memorize it so that I don't have to do all this mouse stuff. But thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
If any of you comes across a way so that you can see some of these items that Excel brings up in larger font, let me know because that would be helpful for you. Okay, I want to point one other thing out before we're done tonight. Notice that here in the Mira-Dravana spreadsheet, and you're recognizing this because, you're recognizing this because some of you have already started doing the work on the Excel assignment. That this first worksheet is what we have for the Excel assignment. And you've got here now some understanding where these numbers are coming from. These are the RE, RP, and RD. You've got some understanding of where these values of weights are coming from. Notice that I took the value here directly from here. This is the market value of the common equity, and so on. And so you know where the weights are coming from. And you can see I've got the entire WACC construction here. This is the WACC equation. The weight times the cost for equity, plus the weight times the cost for preferred, plus the weight times the cost for debt, times 1 minus the tax rate. And I've given some intermediate values to make it a lot easier for me to calculate rather than having to do all the math in one string, okay? So you see what I'm doing in all of this. But I want you to see what happens next. You'll notice that I've got all of this in one spreadsheet, and this is a spreadsheet that some of you have already started to replicate by having some of the values already in this file that is values only, but no formulas or functions. And then the next Excel assignment, we're going to use what I refer to as a multi-columnar valuation structure, just so we can see how present value and net present value are constructed. And the next spreadsheet, we'll go through and do some forecasting. Notice that we start with 2019, and we're going to forecast all the way through 2025. So we're fully into WAG territory. And then we're going to apply some valuation models, which I'm not expecting you to understand any of this at the moment, but you'll understand it very well when we get there. And we do it without adjustments and with adjustments. And then there's a few other items we have here, and only one of which we'll actually replicate in this class, and it'll be the corporate jet example. By the time we're done with the Excel assignments, you'll have all of these worksheets, absent this G solution and shared by that perhaps, in one spreadsheet. And you will then be able to, anytime you might like to, use a different company's information and put it in here instead of Mira Dravana's, customize everything for it instead of Mira Dravana's, and it will let you do full forecasting and valuation outcomes. I know that based upon all of my inputs, Mira Dravana is worth about $349 million. And I would tell you that that's probably a fairly realistic estimate for the company, given what I know of the company. Okay? And Mira Dravana is, I mean, some of these company names that you're hearing from me are not real companies. The name is not real for the company, but most of these companies that we'll look at are real companies I just happen to know very well. I'm just not at liberty to use their real names. Okay, have you had enough? You ready to cry, Uncle, yet? Well, you guys are champs. In fact, David, I'm going to guess that you have some decent understanding of this because you're able to multitask better than I am. No, hey, I don't blame you, especially if you've got the videos to look back to and such. So I would implore you to not only review some of this video from tonight, and I'll break this up into several segments just like I did last week's. Not only view this video from tonight, but look at the videos on time value of money as we prepare for next week and as you're working through some of the assignment. I think that this week's assignment is the second half of the problem set and then the fulfillment of the first Excel assignment. And so again, some of you are well along that road. Any final questions you might like to ask before we sign off this evening?
I just have a question related to the assignment, but I can ask you later if you want.
No, go ahead. If you've got it, Michael, others might as well.
Yeah, it's just the growth question. I think you touched on it a little bit, but 2.5% is given. But you're asking for the internal growth rate. Are we just? I mean, I don't. Are we just using 2.5% for those?
Nope. Let me show you. Good question,
So,
by the
yeah.
way. Okay. So here you should be looking at the math of value creation, and you'll see that on the front I've given you 2.5%, and I've told you that when I'm asking you to employ G, that you're going to use 2.5%. But one of the questions, the one that that's being asked about, is the one that wants the IGR and the SGR. Which question was that? Here, it's question H. And here you'll see in my solutions that I've given you all of the quantitative solution, but in my corporate finance worksheet, which I showed you last week and which I sent you by WhatsApp last week, you'll see that we have the elements of the IGR and the SGR right here, okay? Let me explain them briefly. And a few of you asked about this last night, but let me explain them briefly. The sustainable growth rate uses the company's return on equity. And return on equity is net income divided by total equity. And it interacts that return that we have on the company's equity by B, or the retention ratio, which is net income minus dividends divided by net income. And you'll recognize that net income minus dividends is the same thing as retained earnings. So retained earnings, or that which the company retains and reinvests in itself, as a function of net income, gives us a ratio. So a percentage of our net income that we're retaining for the company's reinvestment times the return that we get when we're in on our equity is really what the sustainable growth rate is all about. And it's telling us what rate of growth can the company sustain without bringing on new investment capital. Okay? The IGR, or the internal growth rate, uses return on assets, not return on equity. and interacts it with that same retention ratio. And what we're seeing in the internal growth rate is what rate of growth can the company sustain or maintain based upon its current assets. Sustainable is based upon current equity. The internal growth rate, or IGR, is based upon the use of its assets. And that's how these differ. Does that get close to what you were hoping to ask about, Michael?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
So what's NI? I'm sorry.
Net income.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Don't mistake that with net investment.
Right.
Net investment is the change in invested capital, and the notation for that is NETINV, net investment, whereas net income, the notation is NI. And when we talk about dividends, we're talking about all dividends added up. So this would be preferred and common dividends.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, guys, you were absolute champ for hanging in there. Tonight is the most difficult of the classes because it is so much little detail that you're not used to and that you're not quite sure how it fits in different places. Next week's not as challenging, and it gets less challenging beyond that. So you've hit the pinnacle at the moment, believe it or not. Okay? Yeah, right, Carol? Okay. All right. Well, look, unless you have something else, I'm going to go ahead and sign off, and I'll try to get...
I have a question. So we will not have any session on Monday?
We will not have a session on Monday. I'm going to change the due date on the assignments that would have been due Tuesday. I'm going to change them to Wednesday night. So you got a little bit more time. And effectively, the first half hour or so of our class on Tuesday night becomes your review. Fair enough? Okay. Well, you guys have been great to hang in there, and have a good evening. And I'll try to get these videos posted as quickly as I can.